Today, we're diving into one of the most devastating disasters in American history. But here's the thing. This isn't just a story about a flood. It's really a story about negligence, about wealth, and about a catastrophe that was entirely preventable, and one that ended up changing everything. Just think about that for a second. An entire lake, held back by a single wall, suddenly just let go. Well, on a quiet afternoon back in 1889, that's not a hypothetical. That's exactly what happened. And we're not talking about some little pond here. We are talking about 20 million tons of water. That's the sheer weight, the force that was unleashed all at once. It's a number that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. So how on earth did we get to this point? Well, to really get what happened, you have to understand the setup. You had two completely different worlds living in the exact same narrow valley. So downstream, you had Johnstown. You can picture it, a classic American success story, a bustling, blue-collar, hardworking steel town. But looming just 14 miles upstream was something else entirely, the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. This was a private, ultra-exclusive playground for some of the wealthiest men in America. We're talking Andrew Carnegie, Henry Frick, that level of rich. And they owned the massive dam that held back the lake above the town. And this, right here, is where all the trouble starts. See, the members of this club, they weren't engineers. They didn't look at that dam and see a massive public safety risk. Nope. To them, it was just part of the scenery for their fancy retreat. And in their mission to make their weekends a little more convenient, they made a series of what turned out to be absolutely fatal modifications. And when I say fatal, I mean it. These weren't small mistakes. They were catastrophic errors in judgment. So let's break down the three big ones, the three fatal flaws that basically guaranteed this dam was going to fail. You can think of these as 3 strikes against the dam. And just like in baseball, 3 strikes and you're out. Any one of these would have been a huge, huge problem. But all 3 of them together, it created a perfect storm of negligence. It wasn't a question of if the dam would collapse. It was just a matter of when. Okay, mistake number 1. And the reasoning behind this one just tells you everything you need to know. Every dam has to have a spillway. It's the emergency overflow. Well, the club members not only lowered theirs to make it easier for their carriages to get across, they also stuck a screen on it to keep their expensive game fish from escaping. So their only safety valve was intentionally made smaller and easier to clog, all for a hobby. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, check out mistake number 2. This one left them with basically zero control. The dam was originally built with these huge drain pipes at its base, the one and only way to intentionally lower the lake level in an emergency. The club had them ripped out and sold for scrap, just gone. Now they were completely at the mercy of that one single, undersized, clogged-up spillway. And then there was the third mistake. Someone later described it perfectly. It was like patching a hole in a boat with chewing gum, and honestly, that's not far from the truth. The dam was old and it leaked, but instead of making proper engineering repairs with clay, the club would just order workers to literally plug the holes with mud and straw. It was a cosmetic fix for a deep structural crisis. So let's just recap. You've got a seriously weakened dam, no pressure relief valves, and it's being held together with mud. It was a ticking time bomb just waiting for a trigger, and that trigger came on the very last day of May 1889. An unbelievable storm just stalled out right over the region, dumping nearly a foot of rain in less than 24 hours. The water in the lake rose at a terrifying rate. That little spillway was completely overwhelmed, clogged with debris, totally useless. And then, at 3:10 in the afternoon, after hours of unimaginable pressure, the dam just surrendered. The entire center of it just washed away. The wave that came out of that breach was an absolute monster. Try to picture a wall of churning water 4 stories high, carrying with it everything it touched. Trees, houses, whole railroad cars. It was a liquid battering ram. And it wasn't just big, it was incredibly fast. This wall of water was moving at 40 miles per hour, the speed of an express train. It moved with so much force, it literally scoured the valley floor down to the bedrock as it roared towards the unsuspecting town. And the math of this disaster is just chilling. It took only 14 minutes for this moving mountain of destruction to travel the 14 miles to Johnstown. There was no time to warn anyone, no time to escape. For the town, the impact was nothing short of apocalyptic. When the water was finally gone, the human cost was just beyond comprehension. 2,209 people were dead. Entire bloodlines were erased. In fact, more than 99 whole families were completely wiped out. At the time, this was the single largest loss of civilian life in American history. But the story doesn't end there. In the mud and the wreckage, what happened next, in the courtrooms and in the law books, would create consequences that we all still feel today. Now, this part is just incredible. The first lawsuits against the club, they failed. The courts ruled that the flood was an act of God, basically a natural disaster beyond anyone's control. This meant that the wealthy club members, whose gross negligence directly caused the catastrophe, faced zero legal consequences. Nothing. The entire nation was shocked, and that public outrage was the catalyst for a huge turning point in American law. Because of the Johnstown flood, we helped establish the legal principle of strict liability. It's a simple but revolutionary idea. If you engage in a dangerous activity, like owning a massive, poorly maintained dam, you are responsible for the damage it causes, period. It doesn't matter what you intended, your actions cause the harm, so you're on the hook. And out of all this tragedy, some real systemic change actually happened. This disaster led to things like professional licensing for engineers. It established government oversight of dams, and it created a whole new standard for public safety in our infrastructure. Which really gets to the ultimate lesson here. The structures we built, our dams, our bridges, our buildings, they aren't just collections of math and steel. They represent a promise of safety that we make to the public. The story of the South Fork Dam is a powerful reminder of what happens when that promise is broken. And it leaves us with a critical question that we should always be asking ourselves, even today. When we get complacent or arrogant or cheap, what is the price of forgetting?